Today I'm in the office of the CEO of the City of Monash, and let's welcome together Andi Diamond. Andi, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
This story of the Good Samaritan is well known,
Yes.
and in it, someone asked a question: "Who is my neighbor?" And then Jesus replied, saying that it is the one that you see, the one in need that is within your eyesight, and that you need to respond to their need. And from your experience, if I were to ask you a question, who is a neighbor,
Yeah.
what would you think?
For us, being in local government, we're very much bounded by local government boundaries.
Yep.
So my interest isn't that huge. It's 82.5 square kilometres of Monash
Okay.
with a population of 178,000.
Yeah.
But I think the sense of neighbourhood takes on different meanings. And in local government, I think we actually have to be ambidextrous and prepared to look at neighbourhood from a range of settings. So at the geographical level, the very practical, it's who's in my community,
Yeah.
who's in my street.
Yes.
Probably not the most meaningful definition. Far more meaningful, I think, is where people do connect. It may be in a church, it might be in a community group, it might be in a local park, might be a mum's group, or it might be a group that is more marginalised, it might be a cold community group. So there are lots of different definitions. But in local government, for us, it's always a case of saying that there are universal services that we'll provide, but then also we think there is an obligation to serve other parts of the community who have more difficulty accessing mainstream services.
Yeah. And do you look out for those that are
Yeah.
marginalized or hidden,
Yes.
so to speak?
And we will tend to work with the vulnerable. City of Monash, I think, has a very, very proud history of identifying areas of high needs and working in them.
Yes.
I think we've made a special effort to recognise and celebrate our multiculturalism.
Okay.
We've got staff who will be particularly focused
Yep.
on welcoming different communities and really creating a harmonious Monash. And to
Yes.
date, I think we've done that really, really well. Ours is one of the most significantly changing populations, with over 40% of our population coming from a cold background.
Yeah.
But it's harmonious, and I think we've been very respectful of people's cultures
Yeah.
and celebrate them as part of the norm.
Yeah.
But then, we still remain as, youth services, prime example of us identifying a need and continuing to focus on it. Unlike in a metropolitan Melbourne where we've got few services, or where we here have few services that cater for young kids at risk, local government has stepped in and we provide those services.
Yeah.
So you go into inner city Melbourne where there are 30 to 40 youth agencies
Yeah.
in a small area, whereas here we just don't see that.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And with the different activities that the council puts on, which one would you say that is most successful, I guess, to draw the different communities or people into the community?
That's a really tough question. We've got over 100 discrete functions
Okay.
in council.
Yeah.
I think it is the universal services. It's the libraries, maternal and child health centres,
Oh, yes.
it's the parks, it's the sporting
Yes.
groups. I
Yeah.
think that's been incredibly successful.
Yeah.
I look at our libraries, and again, I'm incredibly proud of what Monash has done in providing library services. Our libraries are more than just providing people information.
Yes.
In some areas, they act as people's lounge rooms. They provide, and together with you, homework support for young
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
So I see it being the human service,
Yes.
community development, universal services.
Yeah, I noticed that libraries are no more place where you go, shh.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. The busier, the noisier they are,
Wow.
the more successful we
Yeah.
think they are.
Yeah. It's always the marginalized and the ones that don't have a voice or can't voice for their own need that I guess really burden me most. in the city of Monash, do you think there are hidden pains that we are not seeing? Or maybe you are seeing, but perhaps haven't got around to how to solve this, how to reach the people yet. So are there hidden pains, and how, if there are, how do we reach them?
I think in any community there are hidden pains, and I'd have to be quite honest to say I don't think we even scratch the surface. So for us, over the last year or two, our focus has been on prevention of family violence. That's the area that we've really focused on. And if you look at the data that surrounds that, it's one of the areas that is most underreported. So we think that there are lots of people who do experience a form of violence. We certainly see through our services, women who are experiencing postnatal depression. We see lots of drug and alcohol issues.
Yes.
We see issues relating to people's sexuality. But increasingly, local government, as I say, focuses on universal services, and we're not necessarily the agency who's going to see it. Just recently, Holmes Glen TAFE organised a new program, Youth Foyer, which I think is done in conjunction with Brotherhood of St. Lawrence.
Right.
Fabulous program to bring young people back into education, and kids who've absolutely been homeless and had difficult lives. This is part of our community. And I think it's easy to assume because we're leafy, we're green, we're one of the middle suburbs, there aren't the issues that there are in other municipalities, and that's simply not true. And that's why maybe on the exterior we look fine, but they're peddling underneath. If I may, I know you from before, that you were director of I think it's community services at Monash, and then for a period went over to City of Yarra, and then you're back here as CEO. I'm sure that there is some personal motivation. I know you've done a PhD as well. Where is your area of passion when it comes to building community? And then, how? Maybe I'll ask the following question would be, what drives you to work? What motivates you to work each day? Well, for starters, my background is as a social worker, so I've always focused on working with people. And the areas that I worked in predominantly were working with very young kids who'd been sexually abused, then went into child protection, had a background in psych services. So I've always enjoyed working with people. The reason I came into local government is that there is no level of government that provides the range of opportunities to work with people, either individually or collectively. For me, watching people gain a sense of pride in their community and the place they live, feel that they are connected, that's what absolutely drives me. And as CEO, I have the privilege not only, I think, of seeing community create connection and a real attribute and love for where they live, but I have the great pleasure of watching staff do that. And for us to be able to deliver basic services that meet people's needs, for me to come into work and to have a letter from a resident that thanks the staff for doing more than they expected, that's the absolute driver. It's quite fabulous. And I've got to say, in Monash, we do get a lot of that. People are genuinely appreciative, and I'm fortunate to lead a group of people who are really, really keen to do the right thing.
I read the Bible, and the God we worship is deeply concerned with the suffering and those who are lonely, the aged, the children, the widows, the orphans, right? Constantly talk about that. And from Scripture, the people of God, now represented by the church, is to reach out with mercy. But also the same component, Scripture clearly says that God has ordained governments to care for its people. And so the mandate of reaching the poor and the isolated are given. It's given both to the church and to the local government. So as a pastor, I see it's so important to have both state and church cooperate when we come to this matter. After all, we have the same mandate, right? From what your knowledge of the need of Clayton is in the whole area of community building, where would those needs be, and how could we as a church located right in Clayton be a part of that and cooperate with you?
I think on a multitude of levels. First and foremost, I think is recognizing just how diverse Clayton is, and ensuring that it continues to remain a safe and welcoming place for both visitors as well as for the community. I think there is the real opportunity for both church and local government to provide the anchor for community members. We do it through our community facilities, through the variety of programs we run, be it home care, be it the aquatics and recreation facilities. But I think it is always keeping that balance between welcoming people, providing support, providing encouragement, providing the connection that we've talked about, but also recognizing the range of needs out there. And I think you rightly point out, in a community like ours where there is a lot of transients, we do see students coming in who very often have come in without English as first language. It's a difficult community to navigate through, to access. So looking at students, but by the same token, ours is an aging demographic with a high proportion of our population living alone. And I think it's reaching out on those levels which are really, really important.
Yeah. You know, there are some expectation of community on the council, that's right, and some expectations that are unreasonable. So when it comes to talk about the needs of people and suffering people, what are some, right expectations we should have of the council, and what are some unrealistic ones?
That answer is best answered by looking at each situation. So really depending on the circumstances of the community and the local government, I think that will often drive things. I think increasingly in local government we're having to ask the question around what's affordable, how far we can go, and if we are the best service or the best provider of a particular service. And it's not a question that we necessarily like asking, because we'd like to think that we're all things to all people, but very clearly we're not. And I think increasingly in 2013 we as a local government have to look at what's core and what's non-core. I think one of the unrealistic expectations is where community says, here's my need, we want council to do something, and council then makes a decision that's a little different to that. I think it's unreasonable to think that if there's a mass of thinking, council will then provide. Council does have a responsibility to determine its range of services, and often it's based on need, but it's also often based on affordability. So I think it's a difficult one to juggle, and thanks for the question.
Well, thanks Andi for your time, and
well, thank you. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Welcome.